Good morning everyone, this is Eugene Lisho, and today we're going to be doing a CloudCompare Basic tutorial as part of the IAFSM Basic Laser Scanner Certification course. This is Module 3, so it's the third in the series of webinars which we've presented thus far. And this is an important one because this is going to be a program that we're going to be using on the training day as well as for the exam. So let's get right into it, and here's a brief overview. CloudCompare is an open source program. It's written by Daniel Girardot-Monteau, and he's the main author with plugins and contributions made by others. CloudCompare is available in Windows, Mac, and Linux, and so it's fairly accessible and freely downloadable. The primary purpose is for 3D point cloud processing. So you can edit, you can transform, you can do registration, and even comparisons between 3D point clouds. So it's a very, very powerful tool. And a lot of the plugins that are in there are very, very specific. So it's kind of nice that people are contributing and donating different things to CloudCompare. The home page is here. So if you want to download and start practicing with CloudCompare, it's right over here. Just go to the download section and you'll see it. I do have the page up here, so let me just bring it in. This is kind of what the home page looks like. We'll make a mention here that although it is open source, they do take donations. And when I say they, I mean Daniel, just because he's been supporting this on his own, writing plugins and doing things like that for other people, enhancing the software. He's very, very open with the community and very, very helpful as well. So just go here, you go to the download section, and you go down here, you'll see there's Windows, Mac, and there's Linux there. There's also beta versions that are available regularly. There's also some tutorials, so if this tutorial is fairly simple for you, just go here, and there's some other information that's available. There's also a forum if you have any questions, and you can always report any bugs or anything like that. There's other presentation materials that are here. Like I said, a lot of information on this website. If you go to YouTube as well, it's also a great resource. Okay, let me move this out of the way. So in this tutorial, we're really going to be focusing on the basics, just getting you started for people who are not familiar with CloudCompare. Some of these things you may be able to figure out on your own, but this is going to be a quick start, let's say, on how to get moving and how to manipulate files in CloudCompare. There will be additional training at the conference, so there will be probably a couple of hours working with exercise files and getting a little bit deeper into the software. So reviewing and understanding this basic webinar that we're doing at the moment is going to be important. Again, it is required for the basic certification exam, so you'll be receiving some exercise files, and on those files you'll have to manipulate them in CloudCompare, maybe take some measurements or do some different things. So it's pretty clear that this is going to be important, so please make sure that you do understand CloudCompare at least at a basic level. So here are a list of topics that we're going to be covering today. May or may not get into the animation plugin here, but I think for the most part we're going to cover everything depending on how the time goes. So we're going to start with importing files, and that's really just the start of it. And one thing you'll find is CloudCompare is fantastic for importing and converting files. It has a huge list of import types, and you can convert and change and do all kinds of things. So it's, if not for anything else, it's fantastic just for this. So let me get the CloudCompare open here, and we're going to start, and I'll show you what we can do here. I got it set up on my machine already, and this is the basic interface, the first thing that you'll see when you originally launch CloudCompare. There is no really import, it's just really about opening files. So you can do it by the icon here or just go File Open. Either way would be the same. Now I have some files already here that I could open. Now these are PLY files. So PLY is a MeshLab file which has been converted, and you can open, like I said, PLYs. You'll see here that I also have a bin file. So a bin file is the native format for CloudCompare. So if you have a number of files and you save them all as a bin file, you can open them directly again as like a, for example, like a project file. But another way you can do this, and I've got some files that are listed here, and you can just drag and drop files inside. So I'll try one or maybe three here. So this first one that I'm going to be dropping in is going to be an E57 file. So I'm just going to drag and drop it, and you'll see that it automatically recognizes that it's an E57 and will import it right away. So that's nice. for the automatic detection, and you'll see that it comes up here as so. So I'm just going to move around. Now I'm using a 3D mouse to sort of move this left and right, but if you want to manipulate a point cloud, right mouse button, if you click and drag, that will be your pan. Left mouse button will be your rotate, just like this. Okay, and then your mouse wheel will be for zooming in and out. And those are the three basic manipulators or navigation tools you're going to use on the mouse. Now, this is a E57 file. I'm going to open up a different file now. I'm going to go in and open up a, let's see, I think this is a PTS file, so I'm going to drag and drop this in, and you'll see that when you open up a PTS file, it'll ask you, hey, are you sure about all these fields that we have? So the first three are recognized as X, Y, and Z coordinates. Then there's a scalar field, and then we have the red, green, and blue values for the points, for each of these points. Now, if for whatever reason you have this in different formats, and sometimes that does happen, you can click down on these little columns where the arrow is and basically reassign these values for whatever reason. If you didn't want a scalar field, you could just choose ignore. And I'm going to talk more regarding scalar fields and what they are. But this particular field at the moment is the intensity value. This is a set of scans that were taken by a terrestrial laser scanner. So it collects the intensity value or the reflectance value, and that gets imported as well. So this is going to take a second. It does give you the approximate number of points here. So it looks like I have 15.9 million points. And once this is done, we will continue on with one more file. And while that's doing that, I'm going to bring it up here so that I have it. And I'll use this one here. Okay. Alright, that looks like it's in. Now, it's sort of interesting here. If I zoom out a bit, you'll see that I actually have 2 point clouds, but they're separated by a very, very large distance. So I have one that's up here, and I have one that's down here. So I'm just going to leave that for the moment. And what I'm going to do is I am going to open up another file format, and this one here is actually going to be an OBJ file. So this is not a point cloud, it's actually a mesh file. So I'm going to drag and drop it here. This is going to start loading automatically. So I'll have 3 files into the view. Okay, so now you'll see that I have 1, 2, 3 files. And what's interesting is, and you'll notice this right off the bat, is that this tire that I have, okay, is not scaled properly. Or what I should say is that I have a mixture of scales. So if I move in close to this point cloud, you'll see that it's actually a house. So if I turn it around, you'll see that I've got it, and it's got some funny colors on it. So these are the scalar fields that are being shown here, and I'll get to that in a minute. But you notice that the scale is way off. And that brings up an important rule about CloudCompare, and that is that it actually has no units. And so you have to be aware of everything that you're importing and in what scale or what units it's in. So here I have a mixture. I know that this tire that's here is in millimeters, and I know that this point cloud here is in meters. So as a result, I have a very large tire here because it thinks the scale is in meters, which is not true. But we're going to just do some things here. The scale is not all that important right now. What I want to do now is just talk about navigation here. The first thing to recognize is here we have a DB tree. Okay, this is like your structured view, or this is where you have like different layers, let's say, and you can turn things off and on by looking at these checkboxes. So what I'm going to do is I'll shut off this, and I'll just keep this what we're calling the crime house. In terms of the properties, when I have something selected, it gives me a list of information and properties that are down in this properties window. So as I scroll down, you can see that it's visible right now. I'm going to zoom in here so you get a little bit closer. Now because I have it selected, you'll see that I have a bounding box on here. I have it selected here, it has a bounding box, and it gives me the properties. And right now it's showing that the scalar field is being shown. Well, actually what I want is the colors. So I'm going to click down on this, and you'll see it says RGB. So if you ever have a point cloud that comes in and it's got the colors, the scalar colors, you can just switch it back to red, green, and blue, so long as it has red, green, and blue data. In some cases it may not, depending on what the source of the data is. So this is what the house looks like now. Now I'm going to switch back to my 3D mouse. Okay, so that's right there. And as we go down, it shows you the box overall dimensions, the bounding box, the box center. It shows some other information down here, like the number of points. If there's like a scale difference, or if somebody's changed the scale. But it does have a scalar field, and it shows it with colors which are blue, green, and red. So a bunch of information here that is helpful. Now let's talk about the navigation here. So down on the left side is where I have some important information. With anything selected, I'm going to start from here where the zoom is, zoom in center. So if I click on that, you'll see that it just zoomed in center. So if I was really far away, okay, or I move it out of the way or whatever, click on the object once, and I'm just going to go to zoom, and it pops it back in, which is helpful. So if there's one particular object that you want to focus in on, even when I have multiple that are on, like this, if I click on this shop van and I click zoom, it basically zooms into that particular object. If I wanted the tire and I hit zoom, the same thing happens. So that's helpful, for sure. I'm going to shut these back off and just keep the house visible. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I obviously have this off at a strange angle, like this. And you can have presets for views. So this is the top-down. I'm going to click on that, and you'll see that I have a top-down view. Front, sides, back, okay, like this, and then even the bottom down here like this. So a number of views that you can choose very quickly. Now, of course, with the laser scanner, you have an inclinometer, or you have some kind of a leveling instrument, so it knows which way is up. If this was a photogrammetry model, for example, this tire that I have is a photogrammetry model, it may not be oriented in the proper direction. So if I go to top down, you'll see that it's not exactly top down. If I go to the front, well, you can see it's kind of off here. So that's something that you can do in CloudCompare, which is reposition or transform the position of these objects. But for now, just be aware that the defaults are over here. Let me go back to the house. And what I'm going to show you here are a couple of things. So when I'm rotating, or as I'm rotating right now, you'll see that you're not seeing any kind of manipulators, or if you go in here, this, I'm not sure what they call it in CloudCompare. Let me just go back here. The pivot, there you go. So if I go to always visible, you'll see that it's always on. So if this thing is in your way and gets annoying, what you can do is just go to, only when you're doing rotation, and now when I turn it, it disappears after I stop turning around. Okay, so that may be helpful to you. For me, I don't really need it, so I'm just going to put never visible. It doesn't really bother me, so I just keep a nice clean interface, so you can do that as well. Now, the other important one here is going to be setting the current view mode. So at the moment, I should have object-centered perspective, but you may want to choose orthographic projection. Now, what's the difference? Well, if I go to a top-down view, what happens here is, if you look, for example, on this wall here, I can actually see the bottom and I can see the top of the wall. If I switch to an orthographic projection, okay, I can no longer see the bottom of the wall. So everything is squared. The X and Y axes are squared, and I don't see with perspective. And so an example of that would be if I was looking down a road, a long road, as the road gets farther away, it also looks or appears to get smaller and smaller, even though that I know that, let's say, for example, the road is a consistent width all the way down. So this is helpful when you want to look at, for example, cross sections and things like that. And so again, you can just change it here. Object-centered perspective is rotating about the object. Now if I switch to this other one, which is viewer-based, now what it does is whenever I rotate, it's going to rotate about the camera. Okay, so if I move this around, you see it's kind of like moving around a circle. Okay, so it's a little bit different. As opposed to the object rotating around, it's now rotating around the camera. I don't like that mode. I like object-centered. I like it to rotate around the object, so I'm going to keep that particular one on. Now, with respect to pivot points, I currently have it set to auto. So you'll see that when I'm rotating, it always rotates with respect to the middle of the screen. But you can change that. So if you have a big point cloud and you want to say, maybe I just want to rotate about somewhere here, I'll just click on that. It's going to figure out where that point is, and then it's going to rotate around. Now for this, I think I'm going to put always, or rotation only. I have it here now. Let me go back. I'm going to shut off the auto. Go to this rotation point. I think that was the problem. I had the auto still stuck on. So I'm going to click a point. Now when I rotate, you see I've reassigned the pivot to this particular area. I can reassign it over here on the door. And so now it's rotating around that point. So this is helpful for navigation for sure. I will leave it like that for now. The other one that I would like to show you is going to be the camera settings. So if I get close to this point cloud and I want to get inside, you'll see that the points start to break apart, and that's because they start getting smaller and smaller. One quick tip, so over here, if you put your mouse in the top left, it'll say default point size. So as I get close, I can make this larger. I just hit the plus on it a little bit, a couple times, and you'll see that it starts to thicken up. So it looks more solid as I get closer. Now another thing that I may want to change, you'll see that as I'm getting close to this wall, these points are still in front of my view here. They aren't sort of disappearing. I haven't busted or gone through this wall yet. Now I have. But if I go back and I want this to disappear sooner, there's some settings and things you can change. So if I go to the camera, I'm only going to show you this right here, which is the clipping plane. If I increase this clipping plane big enough, you'll see right here I start to cut away things that are close to me, like this. Okay, so if I do something like this and click OK, you'll see that as I get close, it's going to start to open up and disappear. So that might be helpful depending on the point cloud that you have and what it is that you're doing. You see it disappears, so you get a view inside. So when you have multiple overlapping surfaces and stuff, this may be helpful to kind of get through and then have a look. Okay, I'm going to change that back for now. So I'll get that back up and I'll put it back roughly about where it was. You can also change the field of view. I'm not going to mess with it, but you can make it 50 degrees, 20 degrees to get a wider field of view, whatever it might be. But clipping plane is one that can be helpful as well. Alright, so that pretty much does it for the navigation tools, and now let's move on. So I talked briefly about the database tree, and in there you saw that there was a scalar field. So I'm going to talk a little more regarding scalar fields and how they can be helpful. Okay, so when talking about scalar fields, the difference between a scalar field and, let's say, a point would be that a point is a dimension of some sort, or if, for example, XYZ coordinates are very specific, they assign a position in 3D space. But a scalar is just a value. It's not a vector, it's not a position in space, it's just a value that's assigned to that particular point. And that could be temperature, it could be some other value or some other thing that you're measuring, like heat. It could be the intensity from a laser scanner. It could be anything. In fact, you can assign a scalar field to any point depending on what it is that you're doing. So looking at this in the structure view, I'm just dealing with this one point cloud right now. As we go around, I have this on, and you'll see that it just has some different colors here. And so the question is, well, what do these colors really mean? Like, are they significant? Are they important? Well, really, for our purposes, we're talking about the laser scanner with intensity. So the areas which are darker, like bluer, should be darker colors, and as they get lighter or towards red, they're going to be brighter surfaces. And we can check that just by switching back. So if I go to RGB, you'll see that the darker surfaces in this bedroom and in the basement here show darker colors, and then up here where we have some really hot spots, okay, here, those are closer to red. I'm going to switch back and you can see the red going in this way. So that's what the scalar field is. Now, it's not really all that helpful to me. Sometimes it can be. If you don't have color and all you have is intensity, then you'll just look at the scalar field. So I'm going to switch back to RGB here. Now, in terms of display, if we go down here, there's some things you can do. So for example, you could show the name of this particular point cloud. I don't need that. I'm going to go down here a bit, and you'll see that point sizes are default. I could increase this by default. I don't need that since I've got the shortcut right up here. And as I go down, you'll see that I can change the scalar field display by making some changes. So I'll go actually switch this back to scalar field. Alright, and there's some different things that you can do. So There's manipulators here that you can slide across. Okay, and you'll see that as I change this, I'm changing something on the point cloud. I'm going to change this one here. Same thing, I'm changing some things. And there's little ones that are up here. And as I change those, you'll see that the color changes as well. Okay, so two of these refer to the display parameters. Okay, display ranges, and the other two are going to be the saturation, and that's basically how it's going to color. Okay, so let me back up. I'm going to set this back down. So this is display, so I'm not going to display anything that is lower than this area right here because there's no data there. So I'm just going to move this up a bit and that'll be fine. And up top here, you'll see that I actually do have data almost the whole way. Okay, so this particular range is referring to intensity, so the values reflect the intensity values that were captured by the scanner. In this case, you'll see that it goes negative and positive, and typically intensity will be negative 2048 to positive 2048, or somewhere in that range. And different manufacturers will have different ranges. Some of them may be from 0 to a positive number. They may necessarily not go negative. And here we have what I want to color as red. So as the number, for example, approaches 983, anything above 983, or as it gets close to 983, is going to be red. And the same goes with the blue. As I go down to, let's say, somewhere around, let me go to about 1,000 again. Let's say 997. Anything below that would be colored as blue, and you can see the yellowish is in between. So this is important for display, and this will become more important later on when we start doing cloud-to-cloud comparisons or comparing two point clouds together. But be aware that the scalar field is here, and we can do some different things with scalar field, like filtering and converting point clouds or assigning these as the colors and stuff like that. But we'll discuss that a little bit more later. So let's move on to the next section. Okay, I'm going to slide ambient occlusion in here simply because it is often helpful when you have a point cloud that doesn't have any color or intensity data. And sometimes this could be from a type of scanner that is only collecting point data for whatever reason, or if, for example, you didn't record data like a color, or in one case, for example, if you're doing a laser scan in an area which is very, very bright. So for example, a snowy area. Well, the colors may not help you distinguish between varying features of the ground or something like that, because everything just comes back as white. So what we're going to do is switch to CloudCompare, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, I'm going to import another file. This was captured with a dot product scanner. This is the DPI. I'm going to shut everything off except for this particular point cloud. I'm going to highlight it, and then I'm going to zoom into it. So there it is there. And I'm going to rotate around here. So this is just a little simulated body on the ground. And you'll see that I do in fact have color, okay, which is okay. But in some cases, if I didn't have color and I switched to none, you'll see that this is what I would get. The points are there, but it's just very, very difficult to distinguish what things are in fact, just because, well, it doesn't have any particular shading. So in CloudCompare, just a note here, because this is really important, it's kind of a source of frustration for people who are new at this. Any function that you want to run on a point cloud, you need to make sure that that point cloud or the point clouds that you want to manipulate somehow or perform a function on are selected. So I have just this body one selected, and that will activate whatever functions I'm able to do. If I click on something else, you'll see that some icons will gray out. So make sure you have the proper point cloud or mesh or whatever it is selected before you run any function. So on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a Ambient Occlusion plugin, and this will give it some color or make it so that we can distinguish the edges and that sort of thing. So in this particular example, I'm only going to choose the default. So 256, it's going to do it in the positive z-axis. So the direction is important, and render resolution 1024. You can increase some of these to get better quality or better resolution and detail. So I'm going to let this cook here for a little bit. It won't take too long, as you see it's going along, and then I'll just turn it on once it's completed with the result. Okay, so we've come back now, and you can see that I have this type of faux lighting in the scene. So this is helpful, like I said, in cases where lighting is a problem or you don't have any color. This will give you at least the ability to distinguish between different parts of the point cloud. So if we go down, you'll see that here with the point cloud selected, I've got a scalar field now, and this is a new scalar field that has been assigned. So each of these points now has some kind of a value. Let me go down some more, and you'll see here we can go back to the properties and we can start changing some things here to get better contrast. So if I move this, okay, like this, we can change some things. You can change what's displayed, okay, back and forth. So let me go back up. I'm going to leave the, let me go back. I'll just leave the defaults, which was right to the extents, and that's what you got there. Now, if this is something you don't want, you can also delete the scalar fields. So right now I'm on this particular scalar field. I'll probably show you this later as well, but if I go down on Edit, Scalar Fields, at the very bottom, I can go Delete. Okay, so if I delete, it's now gone. Okay, so I have to go back to the color in order to see anything. So that's a useful technique using ambient occlusion. Sometimes it comes up and can be useful. Okay, so we're going to move on here and we're going to talk about measurements and point picking. This is really important, especially the measurements part, because you want to be able to get distances, you want to be able to maybe get information about a particular point, and you can pull out a subset of points by using point picking in CloudCompare. So let's switch back and let's do something. Okay, so I've got a point cloud here of a van in a shooting range, and I'm just going to rotate around so you can have a look. So I want to get some kind of information regarding the points or distances, and it's pretty simple to do, but again, we always have to start with something selected. So I don't have anything selected now, so you'll see everything is grayed out. As soon as I select this, okay, some icons have become available to me. So the first one we want to use is this one here, point picking. And when I click on this, you'll see that a little menu comes up right here. All right. So if I want information about a particular point, I use this one here, this first one, and as I click around on particular points, okay, it's going to give me some information. There we go. So it's got a point number, and it gives me the X, Y, Z, and RGB values, and you can move this around, and you can just move around to different points, okay, to get information if you want. The second one here is distances. So if I click on this one and I go, let's say, click here, it took the first point here, but if I click someplace else, 1, 2, you'll see that here it gives me the overall distance, and it'll be delta X, delta Y, delta Z, and so there's a whole bunch of information that I can gather from this. But really the distance one is the most important. And again, please remember that the units are important. So whatever you imported that point cloud in as, so if it was originally in meters or feet or inches, that's actually what you're going to be reading. So if you're uncertain, sometimes it's just helpful to take some kind of a check. So let's say, for example, I want to take a measurement between the center of the tires here and here. So that gives me about 2.2 meters. So I'm pretty sure that's meters, not inches, and not feet. So that's one way to check. Another way to check would be to actually have some kind of a scale in here that you can check against, and that'll be definitive because you'll know exactly what the measurement is. Okay, so measurements, just pretty simple. Just click on any 2 points and you'll continually keep getting some information here. Alright, next one is going to be angular measurements. So if I click on that, and you'll see that I have now a triangle, and it gives you the area and gives you a bunch of information here, including angles, which is really, really helpful. So if I click up here and click down here, and maybe down at the center here, you see that I've got this triangle, just like that, and that gives me a bunch of information. So these three, the point picking, distance is probably the most useful one, and then of course angular measurements. So if I go back to a distance and I click 2 points, you'll see here it has save current label. So if I click on that, okay, it actually will put it into my view here. So it'll save this, and if I X out of this, okay, it's actually got it here. I've got a label that I can save, and it will keep this in place, which is kind of nice to know. So measurements, those three basic ones, the point picking, where you just get a label or get some information about a single point. You have measurements, which is clicking 2 points, and then you also get angular measurements, where you click on 3 points. So let's move on to the point picking. This icon up here it says point list picking. So this can be really helpful. I'm going to go back and select the van, which is the point cloud where it says shop van. I'm going to click on this, and now I get a different menu here. Now this particular one, if I go across and just click on a whole bunch of points here, these might be important for some reason on the wall or whatever it might be. You see that I start getting this table that is starting to populate with a whole number of points. So here I've got X, Y, and Z coordinates, and I can save this. So this little set of points here can be saved. So if I click down on the save, you'll see I get X, Y, Z, global, names, new cloud. So for example, if I wanted to create a new point cloud, if I click on this, okay, and then I click save. Oh, actually, I think it did already, and I just hit OK. There we go. You'll see that I have a whole bunch of points that are here now in my database tree. So any one of these points I can click on, and I get some information, and I've got labels and stuff like that, which is really, really helpful. Let me go back here. Let's try this again. So I still have some of the points. I can also save XYZ, and you'll see that I can now save this as a text file. So this can be really helpful if you wanted to import this into Excel or something else, which might be important. Now I'm not going to do that at the moment. I'm just going to leave that as okay. But I just wanted you to be aware that you can click on a number of points, create a little point cloud or a sub point cloud, or you can also export this as an XYZ file. Alright, so we're going to move on into some of the editing tools in CloudCompare. And so those are typically called segmentation, but you can do things like deleting, you can merge scans. There's also some separate scaling tools which I can show you. And the scaling tools are really helpful, especially when you're dealing with photogrammetry, point clouds which have not been scaled. So let's switch back to CloudCompare. Okay, I'm going to clean some of this up here so I don't have a whole mess, and I can just uncheck some of these like that. And I've got this van that's been selected here. Alright, so we're going to get into the segmentation tools. And for that, there's a little pair of scissors up here that say segment. Okay, so again, with the shop van file selected, I'm going to click segment, and I've got this menu that comes up here. So the way this is going to work really is just we're going to choose the selection mode. So I've got activates polyline selection. That's what we're going to be using. Okay, so if I start clicking, oh, actually I think I'm in, oh no, there it goes, it's just a delay. Let me try that again. Let me pause that. I should be able to rotate this around. Now this is chugging along, it's getting a little slow, probably because I'm recording at the same time. But let me get in closer here. In fact, I'm going to get into like a top-down view, and I'm going to segment around this van. Okay, so there's a little pause button here, and if you hit the spacebar off and on, okay, it'll switch to allow you to navigate so you can rotate. Once this is in the selection mode, you can't rotate around or anything like that. So I'm going to just start clicking, and I should get a little polyline here. Yep, there it is. Maybe a little difficult to see, but it is there. And I'm going to keep left clicking, and then to close it or set it, I'm just going to right click, okay, and it'll stop. So now it's there. So then I choose, what do I want to do? Do I want to segment in or segment out? So if I want to segment out, I'll click on that. And so my selection has been segmented out. Now, I haven't finalized anything here. I can actually delete this, okay, which I'm not going to do. But one nice thing you can do here in CloudCompare is I'm just going to hit the check mark button and say, look, I'm done. Okay, and then it'll actually give me 2 point clouds. So I've got this one here, and if I can uncheck it, is this, and then the exterior, which is this. So I can now hide the exterior and just work on this little point cloud here, and I can continue segmenting out different things. And there's different ways to work with the segment tool. So for example, if I go back, I'm on this selected point cloud, go back to segment, and I had the polygon, but I also have a rectangular selection. So if I want to just click and drag like this, something like this, I can do that. And then I can segment out, and then just hit the save button again. So now I've got another component here. So you see I've got this, and I've got this. So you can just keep hiding or keep making these edits Okay, and just to isolate a van or to do whatever. So for example, if I just want to get rid of the ground, one thing, this is an example of where I might use the orthographic projection. So if I go over to here and choose orthographic, everything becomes square. Okay, now the ground is maybe not perfectly level, but what I'm going to do is do my best to kind of level everything like that. Okay, that's good enough. And now I'm going to go back with this one selected. Again, you have to make sure it's selected. Go back to the segment tool, and I'm going to go back to the, well, actually I could use a rectangular selection, but let me go to polygon. I'll do that, and I'm just going to start clicking here. I want to get just under the tires. I would probably do this with a bit more care if I wasn't pressed for time. And now I've just been clicking the left mouse button for this last one. I'm going to click the right mouse button, and that closes the selection. And I'm going to segment out. That disappears, and I'm going to click OK. So again, it gives me another selection. So I'm going to click off. That's the van. That's the ground. So now I've got just the van. Now you can see it looks kind of odd because it's square. That's because I'm in orthographic. I'm going to go back to center perspective. Now it looks a little more normal. Now I've got some points over here that are left over. I could keep deleting those and clean it up, but that's pretty good for now. So something else I'll show you. I have a whole bunch of little segments here. Okay, so I was using the segment tool. I'm going to uncheck the van, and I'm going to turn everything else on, just like that. So I have 3 components here that I've broken apart. Now I could delete this if I didn't need it, but if this was important to me, okay, you can see where the selection is here. This is another selection, and this is another selection. So if I just switch them off and on, like that, you'll see that they're all there, and this one. But they're all separate. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3. So what I do is I just clicked, shift click on all 3, and there's a button up here that's called Merge Multiple Clouds. So I'm going to click on those, and it says, do you want to generate a scalar field with the original cloud index? I can say sure. Okay, and you'll see that it just gives you the 3 separate components, but it gave you a scalar field showing you how they were separated originally. But I can just go back to RGB and I get all my colors back, no big deal. So I can even rename this now. So if you go up here and you right click, okay, actually no, sorry, this one, I think if you double click, there you go, you can just call this the ground, and that's renamed. This one here I can call the van. I'm going to double click, van, and when you turn them back on, okay, you've got them all there. So that's a way that you can actually edit these point clouds, and you can even merge them together, 2 or 3 of them together, just as I showed you with the ground when they were separated. And those are very, very useful when you're cleaning point clouds. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to show you here is the scaling. Now this particular point cloud was from a terrestrial laser scanner, so it came in with units. It came in as meters. But if I go and switch back to the tire that I had, I'm just going to unselect everything except for the tire. Put that back in. I have this little sub point cloud on here too. I'm going to click that one off. Click on tire, and I'm going to zoom in. There we go. So there we go. Now this was massive. This was really, really big. I know that the original point cloud that I had imported was in meters, and so now it thinks that this is in meters. So I'm going to show you something called subsampling first, and then I'm going to scale. I'm not going to scale this mesh. I could right off the bat, but this is another little useful tip that you can use when editing meshes and point clouds. So this is actually a mesh file. It's not a point cloud. You can see as I get in close, it's just completely solid. Okay, now I can even show here as I go down. I want to show the wireframe. There we go. Okay, so now you can see the structure of the surfaces that are underneath here, just like that. But you can do what's called sampling points on a mesh. So I can take this point cloud, with it selected, you'll see that I have an option here. It says sample points on a mesh. So I'm going to do this a couple times. I'll do one. And you can do it, probably the best way to do it is with the points, the number of points that you want to get out of this mesh. So if I say, oh, I don't know, 5,000 points, and I just keep the defaults here, I'm going to go OK. Now I have both on here at the bottom. So I'm going to shut the mesh off. There we go. So now you'll see I have a very, very, very rough point cloud for this particular tire, which is not all that helpful. But let's say, for example, you had a large area of land, of space, and you really didn't need the density, and it was a mesh, maybe from a photogrammetry point cloud or a drone or something like that. You could subsample it and just get a smaller set of the data, which could be helpful. Now let's do this again, but let's use a higher setting. So I'm going to shut this off. I'm going to turn the tire back on right here. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to use subsample, and I'm going to choose now, let's say I choose 5 million. Like that, and I'm going to click OK. It's going to take a second to generate, and I'm going to shut this off. Now this is the point cloud. So you see as I get close, well, I got a lot more density. It looks a lot clearer. Okay, good. So with this selected, I'm going to go down and select just this one here. So this one was actually, sometimes it's really good to keep some information here. So this is 5,000 points, and this one is 5 million. So I'm just going to go 5M so I know what I'm dealing with here. Let's look at the scaling. So if I go to Edit, you'll see that I have a multiply scale. Now, if this was in millimeters or centimeters or something like that, and you wanted to scale it, all you need to do is change the value here, okay, for the scale. Here it says same scale for all dimensions. So when I change the x, it's going to be all the same. So if I went 0.01, okay, so that'll be like 100th, and I hit OK. Okay, this just jumped. So now this is going to be a lot smaller. If I turn on the original point cloud and I zoom out here, well, maybe let me click on that and zoom out, you'll see that I have a very big point cloud, and this one here is the little guy, and it's actually bounced around somewhere, so I have to find it. There we go. So it's somewhere in there. It's somewhere distributed with the points way, way out. I'm just hitting my mouse button, but you get the idea. It's very, very small now compared to the other point cloud. So in the case of photogrammetry, where you have no scale, if you have a reference dimension, you can just multiply through, and that's something that we'll probably show you how to do the day of the training. Okay, so we're going to get into the registration and look at transformation tools and how we can move point clouds around. We can also look at the point picking method and then the full-on cloud-to-cloud registration. So let's switch to CloudCompare and get to it. Now I've got a lot of stuff open here, so I think what I'm going to do is just get rid of all this and just work with a couple of files. So I'm just going to go File, Close All, and you want to just get rid of everything. Yeah, that's no problem. I'm going to open now. I have these two already, so let's see what happens here. If I've got one, or let's say for example I've got the empty room and body one. Let me try that and see how that goes. Alright, let's see what this looks like. So I've got a couple of point clouds. Now they may, well, they're not registered. I can see the wall and the plant here and the wall and the plant here. So if I click on one, it's over here. If I click on the empty room, it's over here. And I can even uncheck and have a look at what I've got. So let's say that I wanted to register the empty room and this one with the body together. Okay, there's different things that I can do. So in order to do cloud-to-cloud registration, or at least if that's our goal in the end, we have to start at a point where the point clouds are initially at least somewhat close together. So we can do that either manually, or we can do that with the point picking method. So what I'm going to do is turn both of these on, and I'm going to just move one point cloud relative to the other. So this is the manual way that you would do it. You need to have one of them selected, and right beside the segment tool here to the right is the Translate Rotate button. So I'm going to click on that, and I've got a little menu that pops up here, and it's telling me that right now I can rotate in X, Y, and Z, and I can translate in X, Y, and Z as well. So if I left click, I'm rotating, okay, and if I right click, I'm going to translate in all the different positions, so X, Y, and Z, right, no problem. So I probably shouldn't have done that already because it looked like they were somewhat aligned vertically. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit the reset button here. That'll put it back to its original position. I'm going to hit the pause button so I can rotate everything. Yeah, they look fairly level, so I'm going to start at this position, and I'm only going to move it in the X and Y, so I don't want to move it in Z. So I'm going to get rid of the Z, so I'm not going to change any elevation. And for rotation, maybe I just want to rotate around the vertical. So now when I do this, if I, let me unpause this, sorry. And when I translate this using the right mouse button, I'm translating. So now I can only do it in the X and Y axis, so I can't move it up and down. You see as I slide it around, it's fixed to a plane. Okay, it's like stuck to a plane. I can't do anything. So I can move it over here. And if I hit the left mouse button, or and I'm going to rotate now just around the Z. So I do this, and you can see I'm rotating around. Okay, so I press pause. So a quick way to do this is if I go to the top-down view, like this. Okay, I like doing this often in orthographic. Okay, just everything is square. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to unpause, and I'm going to use the right mouse button to kind of bring it into position like this, and then I'm going to use the left mouse button to rotate, and this is basically what you're going to do. You're just going to kind of tuck it in kind of close like that, and then look at it from different angles. So I'm going to pause, have a look at it from the front. Okay, so it's not perfect or whatever. Look at it around. I can see that the pot here is, there's like double lines or ghosting, so I've got to make some adjustments. So I'm going to unpause this, and I'm going to slide this over a little bit. Now it's getting a little bit closer, and you get the idea. So you can keep manipulating this and moving it around and try to get it as close as possible. So that's one way you can do this manually. And I'm going to go back to perspective based, and I'm just going to hit OK. And if you hit OK, that left the position of the two almost right on top of each other. You can see there's a little bit of shift there. Now I should say that these were done with a hand scanner pretty quickly, so the accuracy is not the best, but they were just easy files to work with. Alright, what I'm going to do is actually undo what I just did, because I'm going to show you a different method now. This is going to be the point picking method. So I'll take the empty room, I'm going to go back to this segment, I'm going to translate in X and Y like this. Alright, and yeah, I can rotate it around a bit or something just to kind of mess it up, and click OK. So now you can see that they're completely apart, and I'm going to use a point picking method. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is select both point clouds. So I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to click on this one. And what I did was I held down the control key, okay, and I just click on the two. When you click on the two, this icon over here aligns two clouds by picking. So I'm going to click on that. Alright, now it says which one is your reference, which one is going to stay in position, and which one is going to move, okay, the aligned. I'm going to swap these, okay, so now the empty room is going to stay where it is, and I'm going to move the body towards the empty room, and I'm just going to click OK. Alright, so now I have this menu that comes up with two sets of aligned and reference cloud and points that I'm going to pick. So it doesn't matter in what order that I do this in, so long as it's consistent. And I'm going to do this really, really rough. So let's say, for example, I pick the corner here. That'll be a point. Just a second here, I'm getting closer. Oh, it's not picking. Why not? Let me try something else. Here. Oh, there we go. Okay, so I got a point here, and I need to pick the same point up here. Okay, more or less. And I'm going to pick a point here. Okay, and I'm going to pick a point here. Same point there. So it's a really good idea to pick a number of points that are really well spread out. We don't want to always pick everything in a plane. So I'm going to pick something here in the corner. Let's say right in the base here, in that corner. And again, you got to get it as close as you can. I'm doing this rather quickly. So that's 3 sets of points. Now let's say now I'm going to pick something like over here, this bottom corner, like that, and I'm going to do the same thing here, right there. Alright, and you can go on picking a number of different points. I've just got 4 right now, which is about the minimum. You should actually do maybe 5, 6, 7, well spread out. And again, it's not a good idea to choose 6 or 7 points in a very small area. You want them spread out as much as possible. So this looks pretty good. What I can do now is click on Align. Okay, so what I did was it just tucked them together based on those points. But now what it's going to do is it's going to give me some values about how well it fit the two. And I should note here that there's a button here for adjust scale. This is really useful because if you have a laser scan and then you have a photogrammetry point cloud, the one that's being aligned can be scaled as well. So if even though you have a incorrect scale, you can still pick the common points and one will be scaled to the other. So you would scale a photogrammetry point cloud to the laser scan point cloud because that would be your control or the object that has a scale that you can compare to. And I'm just going to click OK. And here what it tells me is that my final RMS is 0.16, so I have about 1.6 centimeters of error if this was all in, I'm assuming it's in meters, but if it was in centimeters that would be even smaller. So I'm going to click OK, and now you see that I have these point clouds aligned together. Okay, they're all just one. So that's one way that you can bring the point clouds together based on point picking. So now what we're going to do though is we're going to move on to cloud. And now I should say the manual method that we did and the point picking method that we did, those are two methods that you would use to bring the point clouds close together, and then you would run cloud to cloud. So we're at a point where we can do that right now. So once again, we just have to select the 2 point clouds that we want to register, and I just did that by holding the control key down to get the 2. And you'll see here that I have finally registers already roughly aligned entities. Well, that's what we want, so we're going to click on that. And once again, it'll ask you which one is your reference and which one is the point cloud to be aligned. So I'm going to swap these. Okay, so the aligned, the one with the body, is going to move to the empty room. And there's different ways that you can apply this. I'm just going to stick with the defaults for the moment, and I'm just going to click OK. And I'll give maybe some more information regarding these settings, but I just want the basics to be followed here. So this went through very quickly, and you can see here that it made an adjustment to the position of the 2, and I've got 0.04 computed on 50,000 points. Now there are some settings that you can use to improve on this, but this is the basic way that you would get point clouds together. So that pretty much covers the basics of CloudCompare very quickly and just to get you kind of going. But we will be treating this in a lot more detail at the conference, and in the meantime, take some practice with this. We are going to be posting this webinar up on the IAFSM website, and I expect that we will also make available some point clouds for you to play with and exercise with in CloudCompare. Thank you very much.